Welcome to this week's Deep Dive. We're here to sift through all the AWS announcements and pull out the ones that really matter for you, our technical listeners.
Yeah, there's always a flood of news, isn't there?
Totally. So this week we're covering May 12th through the 16th, 2025. We've got a mixed networking, compute, dev tools, databases, the whole lot.
Right, and the idea isn't just to list things, but to kind of unpack why they matter. What's the actual impact for your infrastructure or your development workflows?
Exactly. So let's kick off with networking and connectivity. There were some interesting bits there.
Sounds good.
First up, Amazon Lightsail. It looks like they now support IPv6 connectivity using AWS Private Link.
That's right. So before, if you wanted a private connection from your VPC to Lightsail, it was mostly IPv4.
Uh-huh.
Now you've got choices, IPv6 only, IPv4 only, or, dual stack VPC endpoints.
Okay, so more flexibility. What's the bigger picture there, you think?
Well, beyond just options, it's really about future-proofing, right?
Yeah.
And compliance. If you're in an industry or maybe government work with strict IPv6 mandates, this kind of removes a hurdle.
Ah, I see. So you can access Lightsail privately without hitting the public internet using IPv6.
Exactly. And it's available everywhere Lightsail is, so that's good.
Cool. Okay, sticking with IPv6 Kinesis data streams, also got an update here.
Yeah, they've also expanded IPv6 support. Now it includes dual stack, AWS Private Link Interface, VPC endpoints.
So not just public endpoints anymore. This is for private connections inside your VPC too.
Precisely. This follows that trend of broadening IPv6 support across AWS. It covers all AWS regions, even the FIPS 143 validated endpoints.
And the benefit, I guess, for companies running out of IPv4 addresses or needing that IPv6 compliance?
That's the core of it. It just simplifies the network architecture within the VPC if you're moving towards IPv6 or have those requirements. Makes connecting to Kinesis streams easier.
Makes sense. Okay, next up, a new location. AWS Direct Connect is now live in Istanbul, Turkey.
Yeah. That's pretty significant. It's the first direct connect location, actually, in Turkey.
So what does that mean for folks there?
Well, it means dedicated private network connections. We're talking 10 GBPs and 100 GBPs options, and importantly, with MSIC encryption. That's layer 2 security right on the wire.
Right.
So it gives you a much more reliable, potentially lower latency path into, well, pretty much all public AWS regions, GovCloud, local zones, basically bypassing the regular internet. More consistent performance.
Gotcha. Okay, last one in this networking block. EC2 has something called flexible ENA queue allocation. Yeah, it sounds like performance tuning.
It is, yeah. It's about optimizing network performance right at the instance level. ENA queues are like the pathways for network traffic for your instance's network interface, right? Normally, they're kind of fixed. This new feature lets EC2 dynamically allocate the transmit and receive queues across the vCPUs based on what the instance is actually doing.
Oh, interesting. So it adapts.
Kind of, yeah. It gives you more granular control. You can better align the network resources, whether your workload is, say, really network heavy or more CPU bound. It's available in all the commercial regions.
All right, cool stuff on the networking front. Let's pivot to developer tools. CodePipeline saw a couple of updates.
It did. First one is support for Deploy Spec files when you're deploying to EC2.
Deploy Spec. Sounds a bit like code deploys app spec files.
Exactly. If you're using code deploy, this feels familiar. The idea is you can now define your deployment parameters directly in your source repo using YAML.
Ah, so keeping the deployment config with the code.
Right. More infrastructure as code friendly, keeps everything nicely coupled. And it's compatible with the existing app spec stuff too.
Okay. And there was also something about debugging EC2 deployments in CodePipeline, a new interface.
Yeah, this sounds really useful actually, especially for larger deployments. It gives you a new view showing the real-time status for each individual EC2 instance during the deployment.
Oh, that could save some serious headaches. Instead of digging through logs for the one failed instance.
Precisely. Just a live view of what's happening where. Should make troubleshooting much faster.
Nice. CodePipeline also got a new Lambda deploy action. This one has traffic shifting built in.
Yes, this is a big one for serverless folks. Deploying Lambda updates always has that element of risk, right?
Definitely.
So this new action helps manage that. It directly supports linear and canary traffic shifting strategies.
Okay, so gradual rollouts.
Yeah, and crucially, it integrates with CloudWatch alarms. So if something looks off during the shift, high error rates, whatever, it can trigger an automatic rollback.
Ah, so smart. Built-in safety net.
Makes Lambda releases much safer and more controlled.
Okay. AWS CodeBuild also has something new. Remote Docker servers. aimed at speeding up image builds.
That's the idea. The key thing here is a fully managed Docker server that CodeBuild uses, and importantly, it has a persistent cache that's shared across your build.
Persistent cache. So it reuses layers from previous builds.
Exactly. That can dramatically cut down build times, especially if you have complex Docker files or large base images. CodeBuild handles setting it all up, reduces latency, should make CI/CD pipelines more efficient.
Sounds promising. Now, a few big announcements around application modernization using something called AWS Transform. We've got GA for .NET, GA for mainframe, and also migration assessment. This feels like a major push from AWS.
It really does. What's super interesting here is the use of agentic AI, as they call it, to tackle these big, often painful modernization projects.
Agentic AI, so AI helping with the code changes and planning.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Transform for .NET is designed to help move Windows.NET apps to Linux potentially much faster and saving on licensing costs. Transform for mainframe tackles modernizing those big IBM ZOS applications, something that usually takes years.
Wow, mainframe modernization. That's ambitious.
It is. And the migration assessment piece ties in by analyzing your current environment and giving you data-driven recommendations, cost projections, TCO analysis, basically building the business case for migrating to the cloud. Having these GA is a pretty big step for automated modernization tools.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, let's switch over to data management and analytics. AWS Entity Resolution expanded its regional footprint.
Yep, it's now available in Canada Central and Africa, Cape Town.
And just remind us, what does Entity Resolution do?
It's designed to help you match and link related records that might be scattered across different data stores. Think like matching customer records from sales, support, marketing databases without you needing to be an expert in entity resolution or ML yourself.
Gotcha. So broader availability now, up to 12 regions.
Right.
Amazon OpenSearch ingestion got a memory boost?
It did, quite a significant one. The memory allocation for each OpenSearch compute unit, or OCU, went from 8 GB up to 15 GB.
That's nearly double. What's the benefit?
More memory means more capacity for in-memory processing during data ingestion. So for things that are memory hungry, like maybe complex trace analytics pipelines, this allows for higher throughput and more robust processing without you having to change any configurations, and no extra cost.
Nice. Amazon SageMaker catalog, there's new governance for S3 tables. Sounds like tying data lakes and ML governance together.
That's a good way to put it. It's about making it easier to find, share, and govern data that lives in S3 tables, especially when you're using tools compatible with Apache Iceberg.
Okay.
By integrating with SageMaker Catalog, which leverages Amazon Data Zone's governance framework, users can securely search for and get access to approved data sets using semantic search. Makes bridging that gap between the data lake and ML easier with governance baked in.
Okay. AWS Glue Studio also got some enhancements, more file types, single file output option.
Yeah, just adding more flexibility to Glue Studio's visual ETL capabilities. They've added support for more compressed file types, Excel as a source, and XML and Tableau Hyper as targets.
Excel source, that's handy.
Definitely. And the other thing is you can now choose to output your results to S3 as a single file instead of potentially many small files, useful for certain downstream processes.
Right. A couple more governance updates in the SageMaker and DataZone world. Moving projects between domain units and CloudFormation support.
Correct. The first one, moving projects, just gives you more flexibility if your team structures or project responsibilities change. You can reorganize things within your SageMaker and DataZone setup.
Okay, keeps things aligned.
And the second one, adding CloudFormation support for domain units, their owners, and the IAM Identity Center instance. That's about bringing infrastructure as code practices to these governance structures. Makes provisioning more consistent, secure, and repeatable.
Makes sense. And sticking with SageMaker, you can now bring your own Docker image BYOI to the Unified Studio.
Yes. This is important for customers who have specific regulatory needs or maybe just prefer their own custom containers with specific frameworks or libraries already installed.
So more control over the dev environment.
Exactly. Ensures reproducibility, allows custom security hardening, all that good stuff. They do recommend using the official SageMaker distribution image from GitHub as a starting point, which makes sense.
Got it. Okay, let's move on to databases. A lot happening there too. Aurora MySQL has a new GA release, 3.09.
Right, compatible with MySQL 8.0.40. This brings in, the usual security patches and bug fixes from the upstream MySQL release.
Standard stuff. Anything Aurora specific?
Yeah, they mention improvements to database availability, fixes for some InnoDB issues, and also performance boosts for write throughput on the larger instance types. Plus, better cross-region resilience for Aurora Global Database. So definitely worth looking at upgrading.
Okay. And on the PostgreSQL side, version 18 Beta 1 is now in the RDS database preview environment.
Yep, this is your chance to get an early look at what's coming in the next major PostgreSQL version and test it out on RDS.
Any highlights in Beta 1 that caught your eye?
Well, the release notes mention things like query execution improvements, skip scan optimizations, better where clause handling, also more parallel execution capabilities like for GIN index bills and joins, and better observability with more stats in explain, analyze, and better I/O monitoring. Lots to explore there for Postgres users.
Cool. RDS for Oracle got some updates too. The April 2025 release update and a spatial patch bundle.
Yeah, standard maintenance stuff mostly. The April RU brings the latest batch of security fixes and bug fixes for Oracle 19C and 21C. Definitely recommended to apply those.
Right, stay patched.
And for folks using Oracle Spatial and Graph on 19C, there's a specific spatial patch bundle available for that April RU with targeted fixes for those features.
Okay, and RDS for MySQL also has new minor versions of 8.0.42 and 8.4.5.
Correct. Again, the standard advice applies. Upgrade to the latest minor regions to get the latest security fixes, bug fixes, and performance tweaks from the MySQL community.
And RDS makes that easier with things like automatic minor version upgrades, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And managed blue-green deployments, too, for safer Meiji version upgrades. They try to smooth out that patching process.
Good. Last database item. Reserved instances are now available for the newer instance types, the Graviton 4 RAG and MAG, and the Intel R7i and M7i.
Yeah, this is important for cost optimization. These newer instances, especially the Graviton 4 ones, offer significantly better performance and price performance for databases.
So now you can lock in savings on them with RIs.
Right. For Aurora and RDS PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB, you get the usual RI payment options, all upfront, partial, no upfront, and they mention even deeper discounts for the 8th gen Graviton instances. Plus, instance size flexibility still applies, helps you save money on those latest, fastest instances.
All right, makes sense. Let's shift to security, governance, and management. First, AWS config rules have expanded to 17 more regions.
Yeah, much broader coverage now. Config rules are super useful for automatically checking if your AWS resources are configured the way you want them to be, for compliance or security best practices.
And it flags non-compliant resources.
Yep, sends notifications via EventBridge so you can fix things. Having this in more regions just makes it easier to maintain that consistent posture globally.
Okay. Amazon Cognito has a change related to OIDC prompt parameters.
It now supports the prompt parameter in the managed login flow. Specifically, the login value to force reauthentication and none to check for an existing session silently.
So more control over when the user sees the login screen.
Exactly. Login is good for stepping up security in certain flows, while none can improve user experience by avoiding unnecessary prompts if they're already logged in. It also helps with passing through prompts for things like account selection during federated sign-in. Just more flexibility in crafting that authentication journey.
Got it. For GovCloud users, Amazon Data Lifecycle Manager now supports IPv6.
Right. So if you're operating in AWS GovCloud US and using IPv6, you can now use IPv6 endpoints for DLM. Simplifies the networking if you're managing EBS snapshots and AMIs in an IPv6-centric environment.
Straightforward, but important for those users. Okay, SES Mail Manager added a debug logging level.
Yes. This sounds like it could be really helpful when you're troubleshooting tricky email delivery issues.
How so?
The debug level gives you very detailed logs about incoming connections. It logs every single evaluation step and action taken by your traffic policies, plus envelope data, so you can see exactly why an email might have been blocked or routed unexpectedly.
Sounds verbose, though.
Oh, definitely. They recommend only turning it on when you're actively debugging because it generates a lot of data and could incur costs depending on where you send the logs. But for troubleshooting, it's powerful.
Right tool for the job. Okay, AWS Parallel Computing Service, or PCS, now supports accounting with Slurm 24.11.
Yeah, this integrates Slurm's managed accounting features directly into PCS. It lets you monitor cluster usage, set resource limits, manage access control for your HPC workloads, all without needing to run a separate accounting database yourself.
So simpler management for HPC clusters on AWS.
That's the goal. Easier to track who's using what and enforce quotas.
Makes sense. AWS Control Tower has new account-level reporting via APIs for baselines.
Uh-huh. This gives you a programmatic way to check the status of your accounts managed by Control Tower. Things like whether they're enrolled correctly or if they've drifted from the baseline configuration.
So easier automation around Control Tower governance.
Exactly. And there's CloudFormation support too, so you can build this checking into your infrastructure as code workflows. Better visibility and automation for multi-account setups.
Cool.
Yeah.
Another GovCloud update, GuardDuty malware protection for EC2 is now available there.
Right. This extends GuardDuty's capability to scan EBS volumes attached to EC2 instances and container workloads for potential malware into the GovCloud US regions.
And it does this without needing agents installed.
Correct. Agentless scanning. It can be triggered by GuardDuty automatically based on its findings, or you can initiate scans on demand. Important capability for threat detection in those sensitive environments.
Definitely. And Amazon ECR in GovCloud also got 2 updates. Image replication between GovCloud regions and registry policy v2 support.
Yeah, both useful within the GovCloud context. Replicating images between GovCloud regions helps with faster deployments and disaster recovery within that isolated environment. And Registry Policy v2 allows much more granular IAM permission management for all ECR API actions right at the registry level. Simplifies managing who can do what with your container images in GovCloud.
Okay. Last one in this section, Amazon VPC is logging more default resources in CloudTrail now.
Yes. When you create a VPC, it creates a default security group, network ACL, and route table, right?
Right.
Now, the creation or deletion of those specific default resources will also be logged in CloudTrail. Just gives you a slightly more complete audit trail for better visibility and governance of your VPC environment.
Good enhancement for auditing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into compute and containers. Big news here. EC2 P6 B200 instances are GA. These are the NVIDIA B200 GPU ones.
That's them. Powered by the latest NVIDIA Blackwell GPUs. These are beasts. AWS is saying up to 2x the performance compared to the previous P5 instances for AI training and inference.
Wow. What are the specs?
8 B200 GPUs, high bandwidth memory, Intel Xeon processors, EFAV4 networking for really high throughput, low latency communication between instances.
So top tier for heavy AML workloads.
Absolutely. They're available now in US West Oregon, but interestingly, through Amazon EC2 capacity blocks for ML, so you reserve them for specific time blocks.
Oh, okay. Different model. Shifting gears slightly, Amazon ECS now supports EBS provisioned rate for volume initialization. What's that about?
This is about getting consistent high performance from EBS volumes attached to your ECS tasks right from the moment they're created, especially if they're created from snapshots.
So avoiding that initial performance lag sometimes seen with snapshot restore.
Exactly. You can now specify a volume initialization rate when you define EBS volumes for your ECS tasks or services running on either Fargate or EC2. Helps ensure the volumes are fully performant much faster, which is great for databases or IO-intensive apps running in containers.
Makes sense. Amazon Workspaces Pools has a new always-on running mode.
Yeah. Workspaces Pools lets you manage a group of workspaces. Until now, they primarily used an auto-stop mode to save costs when idle.
Right.
The new always-on mode keeps the workspaces running continuously. The benefit is users get access to their virtual desktop session literally in seconds. No waiting for it to start up.
So instant access versus cost savings.
Pretty much. Always On is for users needing immediate, constant access. Auto-stop is still there for more intermittent use cases where cost optimization is key.
Got it. AWS Deadline Cloud, used for rendering and simulations, now supports configuration scripts for its service-managed fleets.
This adds quite a bit of flexibility. These fleets are groups of worker instances managed by AWS. Now you can provide scripts that run with elevated privileges on each worker when it starts up.
And what would you use those scripts for?
Installing custom software, plugins, maybe specific dependencies needed for a vendor job, telemetry collectors, even tools like Docker if you need containerization on the workers. Lets you customize the render environment automatically.
Okay, useful for complex pipelines. Last compute item. EC2 fast launch for Windows instances got simpler. No longer needs a launch template or default VPC.
Yeah, this makes Fast Launch easier to use. Fast Launch basically pre-provisions snapshots to speed up the launch time of Windows instances from specific AMIs.
Right, faster parallel.
Previously, you needed a launch template and a default VPC configured. Now you can just enable it by specifying the AMI ID. Lower barrier to entry for getting those faster Windows launch times.
Nice simplification. Okay, almost there. Let's look at AI and machine learning updates. Amazon Bedrock Guardrails now supports cross-region inference.
Right. Bedrock guardrails are the safety controls you can put around your generative AI models, to filter harmful content or enforce specific interaction patterns.
Wow.
This new feature is optional, but it lets Bedrock utilize compute capacity in different AWS regions if the primary region is experiencing traffic bursts.
So it helps maintain consistent performance and resilience for the guardrails themselves.
Exactly. If one region gets overloaded, requests can be routed elsewhere to ensure the guardrails keep functioning smoothly. And they say there's no extra routing costs for using this.
Good for high traffic or critical applications.
Yeah.
And AWS Health Omics has an update related to CWL workflow outputs.
Yes. Health Omics is used for genomics and life sciences workflows. It now automatically generates a detailed outputs.shan file when you run Common Workflow Language, CWL workflows.
And what does that file contain?
It's basically a complete catalog listing all the output files generated by the workflow and their exact locations in S3. This makes it much easier to automate downstream analysis, validate results, and generally keep track of everything produced by complex bioinformatics pipelines.
Okay, streamlines the post-processing.
Exactly.
All right, just one final update this week in the other category. A new AWS data transfer terminal opened in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yep, in Santa Clara. This is the second one in California.
And these terminals are for
physically moving huge amounts of data into AWS. Think petabyte scale. You basically bring your storage devices to the secure facility, and they provide a high bandwidth connection to upload it directly into S3 or other services.
So for massive data sets where network transfer isn't practical.
Precisely. Media and entertainment, autonomous vehicle data, genomics research, industries that generate enormous data sets. This provides a secure, fast physical on-ramp in another major tech hub.
Got it. Well, that wraps up our look at the key updates for this week. Quite a range again.
It really is. The pace just doesn't slow down, does it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Hopefully this breakdown helps you focus on what might be relevant. We definitely encourage you to click through the links in the show notes if any of these sparked your interest. The documentation has all the details.
Absolutely. Dig deeper into the ones that matter for your projects.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Given just how fast things change and how many new features pop up, how are you prioritizing? What's your strategy for deciding which new AWS capabilities are worth investigating and maybe bringing into your workflows?
That's a constant challenge, isn't it?
It really is. Hopefully this deep dive gives you a bit of a head start each week. Thanks for joining us.